The sound of my wife's scream shattered the calm of the afternoon. I had just stepped out to the backyard to trim some branches when I heard it, a sharp, terrified cry followed by the unmistakable sound of a body hitting the ground. My blood ran cold. I dropped the shears and sprinted around to the front of the house, my heart pounding like a war drum. There, on my own driveway, stood 3 men wearing black vests with the letters, HOA Enforcement, printed in bold white. One of them was towering over my wife, who was clutching her cheek in pain. A bruise was already forming where his fist had connected. For a second, I froze, not because I was afraid, but because my mind couldn't register what I was seeing. These weren't police. They weren't even security guards. They were bullies in costumes, acting like they had authority. And they had just hit my wife. My wife, Anna, is the kindest woman you'd ever meet. She's the type who bakes cookies for the neighbors, who remembers every birthday on the block. If anyone deserved respect, it was her. And yet here she was, humiliated and hurt by men who thought they had the right to terrorize us because we'd refused to pay a bogus HOA fine for leaving our trash cans out one extra day. I could feel the old instincts flooding back, the ones I thought I'd buried when I left the Navy. My vision narrowed, my pulse slowed, and every detail sharpened. Years of training as a SEAL don't disappear just because you hang up the uniform. And in that moment, I wasn't a homeowner dealing with petty neighborhood politics. I was a man protecting his family. Step away from her, I said, my voice low but cutting like steel. The leader, a stocky guy with a shaved head, turned and sneered. This doesn't concern you. HOA business. She interfered. She's my wife, I growled. Everything concerning her concerns me. He laughed. What are you gonna do? Call the cops. By the time they get here, we'll have written you up for 10 violations. That was when I stepped forward, and something in my eyes must have told him this wasn't a bluff. No, I said. By the time the cops get here, you'll be in handcuffs. Before he could react, I moved. SEAL training is about efficiency, no wasted motion. I grabbed his wrist, twisted it behind his back, and shoved him face first into my truck hood. His buddy lunged at me, but one quick elbow to the ribs sent him sprawling. The third hesitated, but the sight of his friends groaning on the pavement made his courage evaporate. On the ground, I barked. My voice carried the authority of someone who had led men into battle. Now, he obeyed, trembling. By the time the sheriff's deputies arrived, summoned by a neighbor who'd witnessed the chaos, the so-called HOA enforcers were lined up on the curb, humiliated and silent. Anna was shaken but safe. I held her hand as the deputies cuffed the men and stuffed them into patrol cars. When they asked for statements, half the neighborhood poured into the street, each telling stories of how these bullies had threatened, extorted, or intimidated them. One elderly man admitted he'd been paying extra dues under the table for fear of losing his home. It all came crumbling down that day. The HOA president, a pompous man named Clark, was arrested for organizing the whole scheme. Turns out he'd hired these thugs to pose as enforcers, thinking nobody would dare stand up to them. But his plan unraveled the moment they chose the wrong house, the wrong family, the wrong man to intimidate. That night, after the chaos settled and Anna finally drifted off to sleep, I sat on the porch with a cup of coffee, staring into the quiet street. My hands still itched with the adrenaline, but my heart was heavy. Violence was never the answer I wanted. I had spent years in service learning how to fight, but also when not to. I never thought I'd need those skills here, in a suburban neighborhood. But sometimes life doesn't give you the choice. Sometimes bullies force your hand. And when they do, you either cower, or you stand tall. In the weeks that followed, the neighborhood transformed. People who had lived in fear of the HOA began to speak freely. Families came to us with gratitude, saying our stand gave them courage. The sheriff's office set up a fraud task force, making sure nothing like this would ever happen again. Anna healed, her bruise fading, but the fire in her eyes never dimmed. She told me she'd never been prouder to be my wife. And I realized something important. True strength isn't about the fights you win, or the enemies you defeat. It's about protecting the people you love, standing up for what's right, and refusing to let fear control your life. So if you take one thing from this story, let it be this: bullies, no matter how loud or intimidating, are powerless against courage. And courage isn't about being fearless, it's about acting in spite of fear. That day, they thought they could break us. Instead, They broke themselves.